One of the tools that we use frequently in our projects is LoDash. I think we've used LoDash in every project all the way back to, well, before LoDash there was underscore and there still is underscore. We use LoDash now. We used to use underscore, but our use of this kind of library as a utility goes all the way back to when we were writing Backbone code. So even though we've switched to different frameworks over the years, from Backbone to Ember to now React, one thing has remained constant. We use LoDash in pretty much everything that we write. It's a very useful utility library, and so I wanted to talk about some of the functionality that you get from LoDash and maybe show you why you might want to be using it in some of your projects. So I'm going to go back to this daily training project that we've done. I went ahead and cleaned out the home component. It still grabs some data from the OMDB API, which we'll use. But for the most part, I wanted to focus just on the LoDash functionality. All right, so the first thing I wanted to show is just a handy little utility. You've probably had to do something similar to this in the past. If you ever need to generate a collection off of just a series of numbers, then you'll find that the times function is really useful. So I can say basically 2 times do something. So I'm using the shorthand notation for functions, using arrow functions here. I can say hellos.push and push in the word hello. And now twice it'll push that into hellos, and then I can just dump that out here. That. And we can drop over here, and you can see it inserted hello twice into my array. Okay, so that's a pretty handy, pretty simple piece of functionality. Another thing that we frequently need is random numbers. So I've seen lots of people write different functions that wrap native JavaScript random number functionality. LoDash has random numbers built in, and then it handles generating a random number between a range. So you can do something like this. I can say random equals underscore.random, and I want a random number between 2 and 10, and let's go ahead and we're going to put that 2, that, and you can see it generated 2, and if I refresh, it generated 7, and so on and so forth.
Justin, does that include 10 or is 10 excluded?
I believe it includes 10, a random number from 2 to 10, so including 2 and including 10. And you can do this. If you want floating point numbers, you can pass it a true. And now you can see that it's generating floating point numbers. So all that's kind of ugly. You wouldn't use this code like this. I just wanted to show both the times and the random, both of which are very handy for things that we do fairly often. Okay, so another thing that we do a lot is we use map. So if I want to turn one collection into a new collection, I can use map to do that. So if you notice, our page is kind of ugly, so let's turn that into a list. So I can say, let's map over the hellos collection, and for each hello, so each item in the collection is passed into this function that I'm writing. I can return, again, I'm writing some JSX here, so hopefully everybody is familiar with React and JSX. It looks funny if you haven't written JSX, but you can put your HTML tags right in line, and then the JSX transpile will turn that into functions later on, but this looks nicer when I'm writing the code. So now I can take that hello, and I'm going to output it into a list item, and then right here, let's wrap that up in an ordered list. I'm going to save that and go look at the page. I messed up something. Oh, I have to actually return it right here. So let's put that into this items array, and instead of sticking hellos directly in there, let's put our new list in, and there we go. So now you can see we've got our hellos in a nicely formatted list. Okay, so now let's do something else interesting here. Let's go ahead and make these hellos unique. And I believe that LoDash will pass me an index as the second parameter. So now let's use string interpolation. So this is new to ES2015. I can wrap my string up in the tick marks, and that means that if I do a $sign with the brackets, whatever is in here will be evaluated and then injected into the string. So we're going to add our index right there like that, save that, and you can see that now we iterate over those hellos and we return a new collection where the hello also has its index appended onto the end of the string. So that's kind of handy. All right, so let's now, well, are there any questions before I move past? Okay, hopefully that's fairly straightforward, fairly simple. Let's go ahead and use some of our movie data that we're loading here. So let's get rid of this stuff. And let's do this. Titles equals _.map. So I have a list of movies loaded into the state. Let me just show you that really quickly. Let's get rid of random right here. And let's use map. So let's iterate over our movies. One other thing that's actually really nice about LoDash is that if you pass it undefined, so if this.state.movies is undefined, map is just going to return an empty array. So it won't crash. It recognizes when you are passing it bad data or uninitialized data in the case of undefined, and it will handle that just fine. Which is also handy because it's quite likely. You can see how I've set movies to an empty array at the beginning up here, but it's highly likely that when your components load, at least in React, you aren't going to have any data there. So you have to wait for an API call to complete, and so during that time period when you have no data, LoDash is good about not crashing. So let's take each one of those movies, and let's just return the title. So let's grab the movie titles. So I know that each movie has a title because I've looked at the API documentation before. So let's just return that for right now. Just going to stick it in line and then we can go take a look. It won't look pretty, but you can see there's this big long list of movie titles that match our query down here, which includes the word star. All right. So that's pretty cool. But what's even cooler is that I don't even have to write out all of this stuff right here. So if I want, I can just delete this code and I can pass it a string. And I can say, each movie has an attribute called title, just go get that for me. And you'll notice that it's getting the title off of the movies. Even without writing any code, LoDash is smart enough to allow you to give it attributes and then you can pull data out based on those attributes. It used to have a separate method called pluck for this. So you do _.pluck. In the latest LoDash version 4, that method is gone and they just want you to use map. Okay, so let's, for just 1 second, let's take a look at some maybe deeper data. Let's change our state up here and ignore the API request for 1 second. So I'm just going to comment out that API request. And let's make our movies a more complex, kind of interesting object. So for each one of the movies in this array, maybe it has a title, my movie. And then let's say that we got back a list of actors. So let's make that an array of some kind of object where the name of the first actor is John and the name of the second actor is Bill. All right. And so maybe what I want to do is I want to pull out one of the actors. Well, what I can do here is for each one of those movies, let's go grab the actors and let's grab the 0 item from there. Save that. We'll look at our code here and it didn't work. So 1 second. Figure out, must have structured the data incorrectly. Actors. Oh, actors 0.name. Sorry about that. There we go. Now we have John. And if I want to go back, I can say actors 1.name And there's Bill. Okay, so you can grab attributes, from the immediate object, or you can actually delve fairly deep down into nested data and pull data attributes from your nested data. So again, that's really cool and pretty powerful, especially if you have some really nasty nested data coming back from your API calls, which we frequently do. Okay, so having said that, we have this map, and we use that for iterating over data. A lot of times I'll see people use map when they really mean each. So map does iterate over data, and I could do things inside of here. So I can have this function where I'm doing stuff with each movie, and maybe I've seen code that looks like this before. Titles equals array, and then titles.push movie.title. Okay, and that code will work just fine. So let's go look. Refresh that page. Oh, I gotta make the API call. Let's do that and clean this data back up. So go back to initial state of no movie data loaded, and now load that. Not working. Let's see. Search movies. Oh, no movie titles. Okay, fix that too. There we go. Okay, now we have our titles back. So flipping back to the code, you can see that that worked just fine. Map iterated over movies. Each movie is passed into this function, and then I'm pushing that movie into this outer array. But that's not actually what map was made for. If you're doing that, you should be using each, not map. Now, each is also just an alias for each. I like each because it's shorter, and that's just what I've always used. I see more and more people using for each. I believe that native JavaScript collections have a for each now, so I'm guessing that's why LoDash is encouraging you to use a for each. But either way, if you're just iterating over a collection, be sure to use each or for each, depending on which flavor of syntax you prefer. Okay. So now let's delve a little bit deeper here into some of the other interesting methods of LoDash. So let's say that I have my movies, and I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to put movies into state.movies. All right, so I grab my movies object, and I want to do something to that data. So I've pulled that from the state, and now let's say that we're going to iterate over each movie. And each one of those movies, I'm going to change its title. I don't know why. I just really like indexes for some reason, and so let's add the index on each one of these movies' titles. So again, we'll use string interpolation. We'll grab the movie.title, and we're going to tack on this index right there. All right. So for each one of those movies, I'm going to add its index, and then let's just take our map function once again. And over the movies, and let's just grab their title, capital title in this case, and we're just going to output that. All right, so we go look at that code, and you can see it's kind of ugly. Let's make it a little less ugly. Yeah, actually, let's not for right now. You can see that it's appended _0, _1, so those indexes are getting inserted onto the titles of each one of those movies. However, I've done something kind of evil here, and that evil is that I've assigned this movies to state.movies. So this variable movies right here is just a reference to this collection. And then I've iterated over that collection and I've actually modified it. So if there's another piece of code, another component, or just any other piece of code in my application that is also reading this.state.movies, I just changed that data out from underneath them. So all of a sudden, they're getting these weird index IDs on the end of their names. And this has bit us before, and I've seen this happen a number of times in code where people mutate objects that other pieces of code potentially depend on. All right, so in this case, we actually don't want to modify the original movies object, but copying collections, especially collections of objects, it can be painful. But luckily, LoDash has a method for that. So you can do a LoDash clone deep, like that. And now when I iterate over movies right here, I'm not iterating over the original one, I'm iterating over a copy. So then when I modify the copy, this only happens in my code, and I haven't messed up the global state of my application. So anytime you need to mutate state in your application, I would suggest, and if you're not using a library like Immutable.js or something else that kind of handles that for you behind the scenes, I would suggest using something like clone deep or some other similar library to handle that. But clone deep has actually saved this a number of times. It's a very useful, handy function. Okay, so let's take a look then at a couple of other things that are really handy. Say I want to find a specific movie. LoDash has a find method. So I can take this.state.movies and pass that to find. And what happens is I get a chance to return a true or a false right here. If I return true, it means the one that I'm interested in has been found. If I return a false, then I'm not interested. So if I go look at this list out here, we have a whole bunch that say Star Wars and a couple that say Star Trek. So let's say we want to find a movie that contains the word Star Wars. So I can say, again, using another LoDash method, I can do an includes. And of course, you can also do an index of on JavaScript strings, but let's do an includes movie.title. So this will say, does the movie.title include the word Star Wars? Okay. Save that, and let's output that into the page, and let's go see if that works. Something didn't work.
You have moves instead of movies.
Oh, thanks.
Line 19.
Typing messed that up. Okay, so this does say done movies, which is interesting there too because it was undefined, but LoDash didn't barf on it. Let's see what I did wrong here. Render function. Alright, so we don't have any movies loaded yet. So there, our movie should be loaded. And fingers are betraying me. So maybe include is not going to work. It should work. Okay, that is true. So that should return true. Okay, it is. Oh, the problem is I'm outputting the whole object. Sorry about that. When I should just be outputting title. And this is now wrong. This hot reloader is betraying me. This is only going to be one movie. So find finds a single movie, rather finds the first thing that matches and returns that. So you can see, there we go again. Oh, the first time through, this thing is, it's not going to find anything. So let's just do this. Sorry about the ugly code, but for demo purposes, this will work. So if find can't find anything, movie will be undefined. So that's the problem, is you can't render out that undefined. Or if you do undefined.title, rather, it's going to work for me. Okay, so there we go. Now we have our title from the first match. So going back over to the code, what if I wanted to find all the matches? Instead of find, you want to use filter. So again, find is only going to give you one. Filter is going to give you a collection where all of them match. So now I'll have movies as a collection, and then I can say, let's grab all of the titles using map again. We should be able to get rid of that code, and we're going to output all of the items that we find. All of the items. There we go. All right. So you can see all of these now have Star Wars in them. So it filtered out anything that did not contain the word Star Wars. That's also a very handy method that we use frequently on the client to be able to trim down the data we have. Here's another method that you can use. Every. Oops, not very. Every. This will say, are all of these Star Wars? In other words, if I pass this collection of movies into the every method, it's going to iterate through every single one of those, and if they all return true, then this will be true. Otherwise, it will be false. And so now, when I output all Star Wars, that should be false. I need to do something else. Let's see here. If all Star Wars, because it's not going to output as a string. Let's do this one. False. True. So this will say if everything is Star Wars, then all will be true. Otherwise, it's going to be false. So then we're going to output that string. And you can see that it's false because there were some Star Trek entries in there. That's handy if you need to test a whole bunch of data over an entire collection. Okay, so the last piece that I kind of wanted to show, let's delete that data, are a couple of really, well, there's another piece I wanted to show here. So I'm just going to switch over to the Chrome debugger for some of this. We're going to use the LoDash homepage here, because I already have LoDash loaded. So say I have an array that looks something like this. 1, 2, 3, and false, which you can do because it's JavaScript. Say I want to get rid of any false, or let's add an undefined in here. That happens too fairly frequently. I want to get rid of anything that evaluates to falsy. You can call compact on that array. And now I only get the values that evaluate to truthy. So the 1, 2, and 4 are all numbers or things that I would want. The same thing can be said of strings. So if I add a string in here, and then I call compact on that again, it'll keep that string. I've used this a number of times with map. So you might map over a collection where inside of the map you run a test. And you say, if, now let's just do it really quickly. So this state movies. Okay. So right here I do something like if movie.title equals Star Wars. Then let's go ahead and return something like this, where we'll return movie.title. But otherwise, we don't return anything. And now, let's take this and let's wrap it back up in an unordered list. And toggle over page. Yeah, something like here. State on movies.
Need to do movie dot title, line 21.
State on moves should be movies.
Thanks. Keep doing this. I keep missing the letter I. Apparently my fingers don't like to type the letter I. And still something's wrong. Come on. Come on. Strange. Okay, so they're all in the fight.
Well, none of them have an exact title of Star Wars, right?
Oh, you're right. Sorry, I was going off of the test that I was using before. Thanks. So we're going to use the include here. Getting too old for this. Just forget stuff. Okay, there we go. So if the movie title includes Star Wars, then we'll return it. And here we go. Okay, so now we get all of the Star Wars entries here. But all of this to show how compact works. There we go. So now our data should be loaded. Okay, so you can see in our collection, I have these undefined. So I've mapped over a given collection, and in that map, what I've done is I've sometimes returned data, but other times I return nothing. So this collection right here is going to have a bunch of undefined inside of it. In this case, we actually luck out because the undefineds just go away. And so I end up with a nice looking list. But had I done this instead, let's return those titles and then just this. Then I iterate over items again, and I append on the list item, this. Now I'm going to have an ugly list. At least that's my prediction. So everything works.
You need your arrows.
No, thanks. Sorry, I'm getting a big hurry. Miss stuff. Okay. So now, let's get rid of this debug breakpoint. Now, there we go. Okay, this was the point I was trying to make. You're going to end up with undefined in your collection. So now I have all these holes sitting here that I need to get rid of. And if I want to do that, I can do compact on that. All right. Oh, sorry. Before, there we go. Do it there. Okay, now they're all clean and everything's going away. Okay, so that's basically a series functions that you can use inside of LoDash. There is one more really cool one that I do want to show because this is really worth looking at. Let's go here. I'm only going to show this in the debugger here. This is just straight out of the documentation. So say I declare an object like this, like that. There we go. So I have an object that is fairly nested and somewhat complex. Then I can use methods like _has, and I can say, does the object have a value at a.b.c? And it's returning false. Why is it returning false? Oh, sorry. So I think you'd have to do 0. There we go. It's because A is an array. There. So this lets me test for the presence of data that is deeply nested in my object structure. The alternative to doing this is a whole bunch of ugly if statements and conditionals. And I've seen that and done that a number of times in my code where if I try to access something on object, like if I ask for object.a, I get some data. But if I ask for object.b, like I tried to do in the example above, I get undefined. Okay, well that's fine. But if I ask for object.a.b.c, all of a sudden I have a syntax error. Like this is going to throw an exception at runtime, and that's bad. But you'll notice above in my first test when I say, hey, does this have A, B, C? It just says no. In addition to has, there's another method called get that will attempt to retrieve the data at that spot. It doesn't throw an exception. Instead, it just says, nope, there's nothing there. But if I come back and I give it the correct path, then I get 3, which is the value that is deeply nested. In addition to that, say I want to change the value that is way down in there. We know it's 3 right now. Let's set it to be 4. So now if I ask for that data at that position, I should get back 4 instead of 3. So the has, the get, and the set make working with complex data structures much easier. So I would also recommend looking at those. All right, so that's it. There are a whole bunch more functions on the LoDash website. You can go out and take a look at the docs. Pretty much every common task that you run into as a developer is probably already done inside of the LoDash library. So this helps us to not write the same boilerplate code over and over again and solve the same problems over and over again. Instead, we can just use this library. All right, any questions? All right, thanks you guys.